What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. So grateful to have you here. I was talking with some guys today and thinking about how this podcast has been going on since 2017, and you guys are still listening. So I'm very grateful. And the format of this podcast is you email me questions. podcast@grangersmith.com is the email. Once again, podcast@grangersmith.com. Ask me anything. Could be about any subject. In fact, the more crazy, the better, because that's going to make your email stand out, and it just broadens the podcast topics, really. I think that over the years, we've talked about a whole different, it has been so varied in the questions, especially as my life has kind of changed through the podcast. I think the questions for me have changed and the audience has changed. I did hear from Tyler, my brother. I did hear from him in Ant-Man literally moments ago before I started this podcast that we are planning this live podcast tour for 2025. Tyler said, do you want to do a podcast tour, a live, where we, set up, we go like to a theater and we set up on the stage and answer questions live. He said, do you want to do that with a live audience in 2025? I said, bro, I've been wanting to do that for years. So I don't know. As far as I know, he's planning it. It may or may not happen soon, but I would imagine it would happen at some point. It's not a matter of if, just when. There's a couple of things I want to talk about on this podcast before we get to the questions. Before we get to your questions, I've been thinking about something, and as we talk a lot on here about churches, and people are looking for churches and thinking about churches and hurt from churches, and they don't want to go to church anymore because of what it represents, or they think that I'm good on my own, I don't need a church, or I'm good, I could find God in the woods, or you don't need a church to make you a Christian. We get all these kind of comments, which is not my point. My point is, today, I think so many times the root problem of a lot of those jaded feelings about the gathering is a misunderstanding about the role of pastor. And that's a pretty deep topic, and the Bible is very clear. You might not know this. The Bible is very clear about the role of a pastor, what he should be doing, what his job is, why the Lord calls pastors, and as leaders of the church, these pastors are sometimes referred to, depending on the church, as elder or overseer or bishop. It's all the same root. That root of that word, what it means in both Hebrew and Greek, both of them mean shepherd. And they are thought of, they are illustrated in the Bible as a shepherd and sheep. The flock, the sheep, is the people. And there is the great shepherd, Jesus, and all of his sheep, which he talks about, like in John 10, when he says, my sheep hear my voice, and that I know them, and they follow me. And I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand, right? So he talks about all the flock, but then there's like these mini flocks, and those are the under shepherds. And that's what we hear about in the Bible. That's most of the time when we're hearing about pastors, we're talking about the flocks within the big flock, and the under shepherds are in charge. And so these are churches. A church, people are right in saying that it's not the building and the brick and the mortar. It is the gathering. That word church, ecclesia, means gathering. So the church is the gathering, which is why, like for instance, at my church at Emmaus, at the beginning, we would say the appropriate way to start, the right way to say hello would be welcome to this gathering of Emmaus Church. You see what I mean? So instead of saying welcome to our church, welcome to the gathering. Because we, the people, the gathering, this is this gathering of the church. This is today's gathering, right? As opposed to the building or the place. And so when we think about these under shepherds, pastors, elders, bishops, when we think of this, and we think of in terms of what the Bible always illustrates as a shepherd and sheep, and we think of the flock, think of the little flock, and a flock would be in a certain area. You would understand the boundaries of the flock. The boundaries of that smaller flock would be the church. And I'm walking through this because I get so many emails and questions about church. What is church? Why is church? Who is church? I don't need to go to church, or I do need to go to church. But maybe it would help, instead of just saying, here's what you need to do, maybe it would help if first we just talked about what church is. And that's a longer topic, but just basically, let's think of it in terms of a shepherd and a flock, a little flock. And the flock would have boundaries. You would know who's in the flock. You would know, if you were a shepherd, you would know who are your sheep, and then who are the sheep on the mountain over there. That's the other guy's flock, the other shepherd. And then there would be one in the valley, and that's a bigger flock. And that one that's bigger in the valley, it has 3 shepherds because those guys have to know every sheep in their flock. And because there's more sheep than the one in the hill, the ones down here, they need more shepherds. So in the Bible, in the New Testament, when letters are going to the churches, right? Paul's writing letters, John's writing letters. These letters go out to the churches and to the elders. Like it's the elders in Ephesus. So it's plural. So the bigger the flock, the more shepherds, right? Are you tracking with me so far? A shepherd is thought of as just like a pastor is thought of just like a shepherd in terms of their role is to care for the flock, protect, guide, feed, in all the same analogies. And where I'm going with this really is, I think we've misdefined it a lot of times. And so when we think of churches, sometimes we see someone on Instagram, could be me, giving a message. And if I'm in New Jersey giving a message, I'm not their pastor. I'm just a preacher. I'm an evangelist coming in and preaching the word. And that's different than a pastor. A church must have a pastor. And the bigger it gets, it must have multiple pastors. A church cannot exist with a gathering of people, which is what it is, and a preacher or an evangelist. That doesn't fit the bill. The evangelist or the preacher could come in and give a word of exhortation or teaching, but that guy is not caring for the flock. He's not protecting the flock from the wolves. He's not feeding the flock with the spiritual nutrients that meet the appetite of the flock. You tracking with me? So many times we see bad churches, and the reason they're bad, and we can't always point to it, but one of the overarching reasons is they have a preacher and not a pastor. And more often, when they're big, they have one preacher and some associate guys that aren't really doing the job of overseeing either. And so the church, the gathering, doesn't have a leader. Now watch what the Bible says about this. This is crazy. Ezekiel 34. You can check me on this. Ezekiel 34. At the very beginning, verse 1, it says, "Then the word of Yahweh came to me, saying, Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds of Israel." So this is the pastors. "Prophesy and say to these shepherds, Thus says Lord Yahweh, Woe, shepherds of Israel, who have been shepherding themselves. Should not the shepherds shepherd the flock? You eat the fat and clothe yourself with wool. You sacrifice the fat sheep without shepherding the flock. Those who are sickly, you have not strengthened, and the diseased you have not healed, and the broken you have not bound up, and the scattered you have not brought back, nor have you searched for the lost. But with strength and with severity you have dominated them. They were scattered for lack of a shepherd. They had become food for every beast of the field and were scattered. My flock wandered through all the mountains. On every high hill, my flock was scattered all over the surface of the earth, and there was no one to seek or search for them. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of Yahweh. And he goes on to continue to rebuke the shepherds. And those are harsh words. So we could look back at verse 4. It kind of gives this overall definition of what they should be doing, but they're not. Verse 4, those who are sickly, you have not strengthened. So a good pastor would strengthen the flock. The diseased, you have not healed. So a good pastor would be doing everything he can to heal the flock. And the broken, you have not bound up. We're talking, this could be as broad as you want, counseling, listening, guiding. And the scattered, you have not brought back. The wonders, the people that are slipping from the faith, that haven't been in a few Sundays. Maybe that's it. Or they're getting weaker in the faith, or they are wayward. The pastor goes and gets them and brings them back. And in order to do that, you would need to know who's in the group, right? You can't search for a wayward sheep if you don't even know who your sheep are, because it's just so many of them, and they just come and go. You don't even know. Next, nor have you searched for the lost. Same thing. But with strength and with severity, you've dominated them. Those are harsh words. And I think with that, I want to play a video. And for those of you watching, can watch it with me. I'll record it for Paul. And those of you listening, you could just listen, because it does the same thing. But I saw this video. I actually shared it with Marshall, my pastor. And I don't know this guy, so this is nothing on him personally, but I think it's such a picture of where we have gone. And so when you hear this, think about that rebuke from Ezekiel 34 that the Lord is telling his prophet Ezekiel to tell to the shepherds. Think of that in your mind, and think how absolutely absurd this is. If you're listening right now to this podcast and you're not a Christian, you could absolutely see how absurd this is for all Christians. And you, the non-believer that's listening, you should laugh at this. Rightly so. You could say that is ridiculous. Who does this guy think he is? And you don't have to be a believer to agree. This is ridiculous. And really the way of so many churches. And this is a possible prediction on how much worse it could get. The backstory is, all I really know is this is a megachurch pastor who created an AI app to pastor his people. So think about it in terms of a shepherd creates an app to shepherd the sheep with. So much so that the people could get on the app, download the app and get it, and then ask him questions, and the AI version of him answers the questions, as if that is fulfilling the role of shepherd. Let me press play.
Okay, I'd love to have my own personal pastor, so I hit the Ron Carpenter Ministries archive, and I call Pastor Ron. And after I call Pastor Ron, let's say, you know what? Let's say I'm not feeling good in my body.
Carpenter, how can I help?
Pastor Ron, I'm not feeling well today. Could you pray for me?
Hey there. I'm sorry to hear you're not feeling well. Let's take a moment to pray together. Heavenly Father, I thank you that you know us and hear us. Right now, I lift up my friend to you. I ask for your healing touch to be upon.
You know more about it? You have to wait. We'll tell you later.
Now, apparently, I don't know a lot about this, but apparently this app is going to cost money, like $50. He's going to charge for it. Let me say, I do know these guys that posted this, I know of them. I don't know a lot. And so I will say that this could be all wrong. Like that could be fake. I don't think it is, I think it's real, but I'm not sitting here stating that this is absolute fact because I don't know this pastor, and maybe this is a total parody, but you could judge for yourself. I don't think it is. I think this guy really created an app, a pastor app that people can get on and say, hey, pastor, I'm sick. Will you pray for me? And because either he doesn't want to, Ezekiel 34, or he's shepherding himself like Ezekiel 34, dominating over them. There's probably not nearly enough. It sounds like it's a big church, big mega church. There's probably not nearly enough pastors to handle the flock. Or he is that cavalier with the word of God that he has slipped away into a form of convenience that's, helping him in some way be able to do things that he really wants to do, like probably play golf or something like that. Once again, I can't comment too much on it because I don't know the guy. But I think it might be just an overall picture of why people go, I don't think I need church. I wouldn't either. If I went to that church, I would say, Granger, I don't need to go to church. Because if that was the version that was the only thing you knew, or if your friend said, hey, come with me to church. You're not a believer. Come with me and I'm going to show you church. And you come there and this is the guy, this is the guy preaching. And he says, oh, by the way, download my app for $49. And if you need a prayer, the AI version of me will pray for you from the algorithm. If I saw that and I was an unbeliever and I went with a friend, I would be like, I ain't going to church anymore. You could have it. You could have your religion. That is so cold and bland and ridiculous. So if you're in a church right now, things you could be asking yourself is, do I have a relationship with a pastor at my church? You might be part of a small church and there's only one pastor. Do you have a relationship with him? If you are part of a moderate or bigger church, there might be 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 pastors. So I'm saying, do you have a relationship with one of them? And I'm not talking about the way that we kind of throw around that word pastor. That's something, that could be a different podcast, but we throw around that word pastor like youth pastor, worship pastor, finance pastor, greetings pastor, sports pastor. Like we throw out all these names. That's not what I mean. And I think I defined it pretty well earlier, what that word means, the shepherd word means. So you wouldn't divide it up and say, if you're in any kind of leadership, let's throw the name pastor on there, and that's what it's called. So you wouldn't be a worship pastor. A worship pastor doesn't exist. You could have a worship leader, the guy or girl that leads worship. You could do that. But you're not a pastor because you're not shepherding, teaching, praying, counseling, overseeing, protecting, feeding. That's not what the worship guy does. The worship guy could be a pastor, but those are two different roles. You see, those they could overlap, but they're different. And so you wouldn't get those two things mixed up. And we need to know this. And so if the way that I've defined it, is that you, if you're listening right now, do you have a relationship with your pastor or one of them, and not this sports guy or not the greeting guy or not the parking lot pastor, the janitorial pastor? Like you wouldn't, no, I'm not talking about that. Do you have, I'm not talking about, is it your best friend? I'm saying, do you have access to him? If you need to talk to your pastor, do you have access to him? Even today, do you have access right now to one of your pastors? Because if you don't, then you are a sheep without a shepherd. And you could read Ezekiel 34 and see yourself as one of those sheep. I don't know why, it occurred to me before I started this podcast that I wanted to at least get that ball rolling. So if you're watching on YouTube, that's a platform for this podcast that you could actually comment on. So go to YouTube, or if you're on it right now, and comment below and Give me some feedback. And of course, your feedback could be, Granger, you're wrong about all of this. Granger, I'm so sick of you talking about this stuff. You're absolutely wrong. You're upside down, and let me tell you why. Give me a good rebuke and tell me why you think that. But what I really want is just to get the gears turning a little bit. I want people to think and go, oh, maybe I've been thinking about church all wrong, or maybe I haven't thought of it that way. I've had these conversations, countless conversations in person with people on this very topic. And many times people will say, I've never thought of it that way. I was never taught that a pastor would be someone that cares for me. That's interesting, right? Very interesting. And by the way, that's on me too. So I am not your pastor. If you're watching this podcast and you're asking me questions, I'm just as good as the AI app. I might as well be Ron's AI pastor, whatever it's called. But I'm no better than that. So people that ask me questions, this is I think, an edifying conversation that we typically have with each other. And I enjoy these conversations, and I hope I can be encouraging and helpful to people with their questions. But I am not your pastor. I'm just answering your questions. You know, this time of year, you might be worried that you didn't get the right gift for someone, or you forgot, or it's too late, or you just don't know what to get them. I've got an idea for you. Go to cameo.com/GrangerSmith, and I'll make you a video message custom just for what you need to whoever you want me to send it to. So if you have a brother or a spouse or a son or a daughter, whoever it might be, just a friend, maybe it's for you too. I'll make you a video message on my phone, and I'll say whatever you need me to say. Plus I'll make up my own stuff. Go to cameo.com/GrangerSmith, and I'll do that for you today. Let's dive into all this pastor talk. We got to really get into some questions. And if you want to email me, podcast@grangersmith.com. First one comes from Emily. It says, hey, Granger, my husband just got a job offer in another state. It is a great opportunity for him, but moving means leaving my family, my job, our church, and everything we built here. I'm torn between wanting to support him and feeling like I'm losing my own stability. Have you ever had to make a big move? How do you decide if it's worth uprooting everything for a new opportunity? Thanks for listening, Emily. Yeah, Emily, this is tough. And I have moved several states over before, twice. But I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. And I'm not you. I have seen, as these things play out, and they play out all the time, I have seen men and women act very differently in these situations. And usually it's pretty consistent that the man is a little bit, he handles the adventure, the unknown, the excitement of change, he handles it a little more loosely. I'm not going to say he handles it better, because I don't think this is a matter of better or worse. I think it's a matter of, I've seen the men are a little bit more free to make the change. Let's do it, And women, I think it's a great trait for a man to think like that. I think it's great for a man to say, let's go, let's pack up. It's an adventure, fresh beginnings. We'll start over. We'll make new friends. We'll grow together. We'll become closer. In fact, I did that in a small way. I did that whenever, after we lost Riv, and I changed houses twice, and ended up where I am here right now, because we lived in an RV in the barn as we built this house, and I wanted to get all my family. I wanted to gather everything and start over in a fresh, unknown, exciting adventure, because I thought that would bond us, and I think it did. So I think it's a good thing that a man is so quick to do that. But such a great balance that it's a good thing also that a woman is in many ways different than that. That a woman builds a nest and builds a home and fills it with the things that she loves, the people that she surrounds herself with, the people that she loves, and her friends and her network and her grocery store and her garden and her school and her doctor's office and her dentist and her, we're talking everything from cleaners to farmer's market to the library to everything that she does, a woman builds. And don't we see a picture of this in nature? Don't we see the beautiful picture every spring when the sparrows go out and the female sparrows are gathering, building this nest. And when I watched it, in Texas, it happens as early as February. You start seeing the birds building their nest. But it's such a picture that, can you imagine, this female sparrow building a nest, and and the male is up on the power line, and he's like, why don't we put the nest over here? Actually, I think it's a better view over here. And the female's like, I've been working for a month building this nest. Don't change my mind, right? So in just naturally, because of our makeup, I think that's the balance. Once again, that's why in God's providence, having a dad and a mom in a home that's the balance that's optimum, right? So the optimal balance creates the optimal results. It's not always like that, and sometimes situations happen that change everything. But I think, Emily, it's so natural for you to have this reservation to go, I don't think I want to move. My family, my job, our church, everything we build here, I don't think that's good. But what is good is you pumping the brakes on him will help him slow the process down and make the decisions with a little more clarity. Because he might go a little too fast and forget about the church situation, forget about the kids' school. Because he could be like, well, my work is here, and this is a great commute, and this is this got a cool backyard, so I think we come here. And you come in, Emily, and you go, the backyard's nice, but we need to be in a place where the kids could have kids their own age so they could play. We need a park. This is too far from the church that we like, that we've researched, which you should research that now. So all to say, I'm not telling you, yes, you need to move. I'm saying that what you're feeling is natural. And sometimes I shouldn't advocate this, but sometimes the feeling that you have that you shouldn't go is so big and so overwhelming that it actually is God using you to tell him no. And I've seen that play out. It happens in ministry, and I see it, in my studies in ministry and seminary. I see this play out a lot, where a man gets a calling from Orlando to shepherd a church, and he says, hey, babe, we're going to move from Lincoln, Nebraska to Orlando. We're going to do it. And it's a great opportunity, and this is what we need. And the wife goes, I ain't going to Orlando. I'm not going. And the Lord is using her to pump the brakes. Once again, that relationship is so critical to have both opinions. So at some point, Emily, you're going to have to reconcile, is this just my fleshly feelings? Or is this something that's much deeper than that? Do I really have some kind of sincerity that's selfless, that's thinking about the kids and thinking about the new town and thinking about my husband and kind of putting this all together rationally? I think you're going to have to reconcile that. I have also seen times when the wife didn't want to go and ended up going and then ended up loving it. My mom was one, and she tells this story all the time, so I know it so well, but my dad and his brother worked together for a long time, for decades. And my dad's brother started this company when they were in their 20s. And they built it and built it and built it and worked and worked and worked. And when they got to be in their late 40s, another company came in and wanted to buy them. And my uncle is 8 years older than my dad. And so my dad's in his late 40s, my uncle is in his late 50s, and he says, hey, this is what I want. I want to sell. This is my dream. Dad's like, I don't know, I still have a lot left in me. And so dad says, I'll still work for the company. My uncle says, okay, I'll work too. So they decide they're both going to work. They're going to sell, but they're both going to work. So they sold, and they both started working, and the company fired them. After the contract was up or whatever legal, the company pushed them out. So my dad is left without a job. So he decides that he is going to buy a ranch with the money, sell everything he has, and buy some land and start cattle ranching. And my mom is like, no, there's no way. I am not a cattle rancher. My dad's like, the Lord has put on my heart that we're going to go and take the boys and we're going to live on a ranch and raise cattle in a rural area that's 20 miles to town in the middle of nowhere. And my mom's like, no, that's not happening. The Lord spoke to you. And my mom, I think she laughs and says, how do you know that wasn't indigestion, that the Lord spoke to you? But later, the Lord spoke to my mom. And she would have to tell the story. Maybe we could bring on her one day. But the Lord spoke to her in a way that was very convicting, because she suddenly got this overwhelming feeling that the Lord was telling her, I could speak to your husband without speaking to you. And she was very taken back by this idea that God told her, I don't have to tell you everything. I could tell him some things, which is just crushing to the pride. But she folded and she said, okay. So then what happened is they moved, they ended up getting this place and moving, and Dad died. I mean, it's crazy. Dad died. And I mean, talking about throw a wrench in some plans. Mom goes forward with buying the cattle and starts the cattle business. Of all things, stays there. And to this day, she still lives there after 10 years since Dad's been gone. So they've had the place since the late 90s, but Dad's been gone 10 years. And she's still there and still has cattle. So Emily, sometimes the Lord doesn't have to speak to you specifically about a situation. He could be using your husband. So I think I've given you a pretty broad scenario of how it could go a lot of different directions, but it's something to think through for all of this. I'm sorry, everybody, that's a little bit of a long answer, but I think it's a good topic. Next question comes from Anonymous. Granger, first off, I want to thank you and Amber for everything that you have done and helped me grow closer to the Lord. I appreciate the encouragement that you both give. I'm a teacher in my 8th year. This year has been the worst of all. I'm trying to deal with a difficult coworker. I get put down, gossiped about, and I am never right. Do I just ignore her? Stand up for myself? It is really hard for me just to trust in God right now. I am thinking and praying about switching jobs. Any advice would be appreciated. Thanks so much. Anonymous, thanks for the email. It's difficult. This is a hard question without me knowing very many details about it. So I think of these questions as, you and I are riding in a cab of a truck and are sitting around a campfire, and you say, can I run something by you? And if I hear this, I'm immediately asking more information. First, have you not talked to the boss? Because the principal in this case, I'm assuming there's a principal because you're a teacher, and I'm assuming it's a school. And I would wonder, your coworkers, your other colleagues, do they know about this? Does the principal know about this? And maybe most importantly, and not that obvious, does the difficult coworker know this? Does the difficult coworker know you feel this way? Communication is key. Information is key. And this has to be something. I mean, you are saying it's really hard for me to trust God right now. I'm thinking and praying about switching jobs. I can't go there yet. You're not trusting God in this. I can't go there unless I know more information. So we'll put that away for a second. And we'll just say, without gossiping, without slandering, while being gentle and humble and respectful and yet truthful and bold, if you can combine those different attributes, self-control, all the fruits of the Spirit, if you can use those attributes and approach this coworker, then I would start there. In fact, the Bible would encourage to start there. Hey, could I take you to coffee on Wednesday? Are you free after work? I'd love to just get away from here, away from the distractions, and I would love to just have a cup of coffee with you. Is that okay? Okay. You go to coffee, you offer to buy the coffee, always courteous, always generous, always respectful, not reactive. You're quick to listen, slow to anger, right? And you just say, I have struggled. I want to be totally honest with you. I've done this for 8 years, and I've struggled a bit this year. And I think you probably could see it. I think you probably have noticed that you and I don't always see eye to eye on things. And I wanted to take you to coffee to say, how could I be better for you? How could I be a better coworker so that for the children and for your sake and for my sake, we reduce this friction, because it just feels like you and I just kind of rub. And I think you're an amazing person. And so I just want to know, how could I be better? How could I serve you better? How could I be a better friend, a better coworker? Because I love my job, and obviously you're really good at your job and you love your job. So how could I get in better standings with you? You start there. I don't think you start anywhere else but there. And you pray before you do it. You pray on the way to the coffee, and you literally pray. Some of y'all listening know exactly what I'm talking about. You literally pray while you're talking. So in between breaths, you're, Lord, give me the words. Lord, give me self-control. Lord, keep me humble. Let me be loving to her, right? So that you're praying, literally praying while you're talking. You say that, you get your piece out, and then it depends on the reaction. It depends on how she reacts to you. It depends on what she says right there at coffee, and then how the next few weeks go. If things are still really bad, you feel like it didn't matter, you're being gossiped about, slandered, then you go to a coworker and you say, I wonder if you could come with me, if you agree, and we could talk to this person together. Is that something we could do? Because I would say most likely other people see it and agree with you. If they don't, if you're the only one in the whole school that sees it and no one else sees it, everyone else loves this coworker, the problem is you. It's all you. You see, everyone's not deceived, and you're the only one right. That's impossible. So if this person really is a problem, then other people see it too. and you do another coffee with a second person, and you say, "Dear coworker, we met 5 weeks ago. We talked about this, and I feel like I'm still not getting it. I feel like you and I still have some friction, and I still want to know how I could be better. I've done this and this and this, like you said, and I still feel like there's a problem. So much so that I brought coworker B here." And then coworker B says, "Yeah, coworker A, I hate to say it, but I agree with her. I see the same thing, and you and I have had the same thing." Okay? That's step 2. If she still says, pacifies the situation, it's still bad, some more time goes by, then now it's time to have a meeting with the principal. The boss, bring the boss in, and you say, "I got coworker B, I got coworker A, and we're having a problem. I don't think it's the best thing for the children for us to have this kind of friction." The principal at that point says, "Work it out," or "Someone's got to leave," or "You're fired," or whatever happens, but resolution takes another step forward at that point, right? So these are just practical steps, and all of them involve conversation, being upfront, being humble, and loving. And if all of that fails, all of it, then you could think about switching jobs. But I don't think in your 8th year you switch jobs until you've gone through those 3 steps. Okay? My time is getting late, so I'm going to end here and say, I love you guys, and we'll see you next Monday. Yee. Thanks for joining me on the Granger Smith podcast. I appreciate all of you guys. You could help me out by rating this podcast on iTunes. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to this channel, hit that little like button and the notifications bell so that you never miss any time I upload a video. Yee.